In Lesson 4.3, Day 2, you will be writing linear equations in different forms. The three different forms that we have talked about are standard form, ax plus by equals c, slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b, and point-slope form, which is y minus y1 equals m times the quantity x minus x1. So in our first example, we're supposed to write this equation in standard form. There's two ways you could go about doing it. The first thing you could do is you could use distributive property to multiply everything in the parentheses by negative 2/3, but then you have some kind of ugly numbers with the fractions. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to start out by multiplying both sides of the equation by 3. Because if I multiply both sides by 3, I'll be able to get rid of this fraction on this side. The reason why I chose 3 is because there's a 3 in the denominator. So I'm going to go ahead and write 3 times the quantity y minus 1, because you have to multiply the entire side by 3, equals, now if I'm going to take this side and multiply it by 3, it's going to be 3 times negative 2/3 times x minus 5. Now over on the left side, 3 times everything on that side, you do distributive property. 3 times y is 3y. 3 times this negative 1 is negative 3, so minus 3, equals. Now over here we have multiplication of three different things, and you can multiply in any order you want. So I'm going to go ahead and just multiply these first two together. When I multiply these first two together, 3 times a negative 2/3, that's really 3 over 1 times a negative 2/3, and the 3's will cancel, and you just have negative 2 times x minus 5. So now I no longer have any fractions. I'm going to go ahead and do distributive property on the right. So 3y minus 3 equals negative 2x. And then a negative 2 times a negative 5 is a positive 10, so plus 10. Now we have an equation with variables on both sides, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the variable. Oh, I'm sorry. They're two different variables, so we are not going to get rid of those. We're going to rearrange it. We're going to move the x to the other side, because in standard form we want x and y together. So if I move that to the other side, or add 2x to both sides, I'm going to end up with a positive 2x, because when you cross the line, you change the sign. So I have 2x plus 3y. And then I'm going to take this negative 3 and I'm going to move that to the other side, or add 3 to both sides. When I move that over to the other side, it becomes positive 3. And the only thing that's left over here is a 10. 10 plus 3 is 13. Now 2x plus 3y equals 13 is the equation in standard form. Remember, standard form has the x and y together on the same side without fractions or decimals, and the coefficient of x cannot be negative. All right, why don't you pause the video and try the next one on your own? This one's a little bit easier because I don't have that fraction, so I can just go ahead and do distributive property right away. So on the left side, I have y minus 1. And on the right side, I have 7 times x, which is 7x, and 7 times 5, which is 35, and it's positive, so it'll be plus 35. Now, if I want to get this into standard form, I need the x and y together on the same side. So I can go ahead and move this 7x over to this side, and I can move this negative 1 over to the other side. So when I move this 7x over here, it's going to be negative 7x. And then I have a positive y here. This has been moved over. When I move it over, it becomes a positive 1. So 35 plus 1 is 36. Now this isn't quite in standard form though, because remember the coefficient of x cannot be negative. So what we can do about that is we can take both sides and multiply by -1. When you do that, it'll change the sign of everything because a -1 times a -7x is positive 7x, and a -1 times y is a negative y, and then 36 times a -1 is -36. Next example, this time we're going to change it to slope-intercept form. So we want it to be in the form of y equals mx plus b. So we can start out by either doing distributive property and multiplying everything by 3/2 x, or if you want to get rid of that fraction, remember you can multiply both sides by that denominator. So let's go ahead and multiply both sides by 2. So we're going to have 2 times the quantity y plus 3 equals, and then the right side I'm also going to multiply by 2, so 2 times 3/2 times the quantity x plus 1. Over on the left side, doing the distributive property, you'll get 2y plus 6, because you multiply everything by 2. And then over here, we have 3 things being multiplied. If I multiply these first 2 together, the 2's will cancel, and I'll end up with 3 over 1, or just 3 times the quantity x plus 1. Then you'll want to go ahead and do the distributive property on the right side. So 2y plus 6 equals 3x plus 3. Now to get it into slope-intercept form, you want to have y all by itself. So I'm going to get rid of this plus 6 by subtracting 6. And when I subtract 6 on this side, I'm going to subtract it right there. So now we have 2y equals 3x minus 3, because 3 take away 6 is -3. And then we have to get this to be just 1y instead of 2y, so we're going to divide both sides by 2. You can divide this entire thing by 2, or like I said before, I like to do it as separate terms divided by 2, so that way you don't forget to do any of your division. So you'll end up with 1y equals 3/2 x minus 3/2. You can leave it as a fraction of 3/2, or you can change it to 3/2 x minus 1 1/2. You may want to pause the video and try the next one on your own. If you want to write this in slope-intercept form, you're going to want to do distributive property first. So you'll have y plus 6 equals -3 times x is -3x, and a -3 times a -4 is +12. Now to get this in slope-intercept form, I want y by itself, so I'm going to get rid of the plus 6 by subtracting 6, and I'm going to subtract 6 from the 12 since those are like terms. Now I have y equals -3x plus 6. All right, our last example says write an equation in point-slope form for the line containing side PU. So we're talking about this right here. Well, in order to be able to write the equation in point-slope form, we need to know a point, and we also need to know the slope. You can get the slope by using the slope formula or just going on the graph and doing rise over run. So we're going to rise 1, 2, 3, and we're going to run 1, 2, 3. So the slope is equal to 3 over 3, or that simplifies to be 1. And now we need to just choose one of the points. It doesn't matter which one. Let's just go ahead and use this one right here. The coordinates for that point are 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 2. Remember, for ordered pairs, it's going right and left, then up or down, which is the opposite of figuring out the slope. So now in point slope form, remember it's y minus y1 equals m times the quantity x minus x1. Now we're going to use this point right here, so we're going to do y minus the y value, which is 2, equals the slope, which is 1, times x minus the x value, which is 4. So there's an equation in point slope form for that line that has that line segment. Now we're going to write an equation in standard form for the same line. So I'm going to take what we had, y minus 2 equals 1 times the quantity x minus 4. And we're going to go ahead and do distributive property, but since it's times 1, it really is not going to change anything. So it's just y minus 2 equals x minus 4. Now to get it in standard form, we want the x and y together on the same side. So we're going to move this x to be over with the y, and we're going to move the negative 2 over to be with the negative 4. And remember, when you cross the line, you change the sign. So this x, when I move it over, becomes a negative x. And then I have a plus y. And then on the other side, I moved the negative 2 over, and it became a positive 2. So negative 4 plus 2 is a negative 2. Now, since the coefficient of x can't be negative, I'm going to go ahead and multiply both sides of my equation by negative 1 to get rid of that negative in front of x. Negative 1 times negative x is just x, and negative 1 times positive y is negative y, and a negative 2 times negative 1 is 2. X minus y equals 2 is the equation in standard form for that same line.